Now this is not just another Google Pixel 3a review from a person who's tried all the different flagship phones out there. I'm coming from the perspective of a person who used this Samsung Galaxy Amp 2 phone as my very first smartphone ever. I'm not a person who has the latest and greatest of everything. I consider myself a relatively average person with a modest income. So if you want a review from the perspective of a normal and, well, honestly, just a cheap person, you want to watch this. I don't have a plan that would allow me to get one of the flagship phones for free or at minimal cost, and I wasn't willing to spend over $1,000 or more on a phone being as cheap as I am. So this time I wanted to spend around $400 to $500. My other criteria was something that had an excellent camera. I didn't rule out iPhones altogether, but I'm generally an anti-Apple person. But that's a topic for another video. Well, it's no secret I eventually chose this Google Pixel 3a. It was a new launch, and let's get one thing straight. The specs on the Galaxy S8, which is one of the front runners in my opinion, are superior than this phone. It's water resistant, the camera's actually pretty decent, and well, the camera's really good. However, the operating system was a little bit older. The battery life has also been reported to be a little on the low side, and they are comparable in price, so I decided to go for the Pixel 3a. Just because it was a couple of years newer, and the Snapdragon 670 processor was, even though maybe a little slower, was still reported to be plenty fast. And again, I'm coming from a low-end smartphone that performs so poorly, but really any of these mid-tier phones would probably be fine.
So here's the fingerprint reader on the back. Opens up everything nice and quick. And people are always like doing this, like they're going like, look, 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 look. And that's not really an indication of how fast the phone is, I don't think. But, you know, if say for example I open up YouTube, it's all quick, it's quite responsive. And here's some of my wonderful videos, as some of you know. The screen is just a smaller area of this entire face. This is the home button there. Flick up and you have just your different opened windows. Flick down and you have your options of settings and going into settings, etc. Squeeze aside, so it has that active edge where you squeeze here and Google Assistant will
Hi, I was just
start.
thinking it's a great time to make cookies. I can help by setting timers if you'd like.
No, thank you. The other features are the fact that it has this headphone jack there. When you do play, I'll play a video right now, but when you do play a video, it comes out of this speaker and this speaker. This is more the microphone, I believe. And so it looks like there's identical speakers on the bottom down facing, but there's actually one speaker here, one speaker here. And if we play, example, you can hear the sound. Speakers are fine. If I'm cooking and got the fan going, I can hear the phone fairly well. Battery life is actually quite good. I watch a lot of videos, by the way, but I do a lot of browsing on it from start to finish through the whole day. It probably goes down to about 40% for a full day's use, from 7 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And charge it up, it's pretty good. It's a USB-C charger and everything goes up, charges quite quickly. Right side you can choose the different modes. Panorama, which is not really that useful, and honestly on this camera not that great. So some of the images stitched together are not useful. Portrait, this is probably one of my favorite modes. It really gives you a good depth of field. So the subject matter is in focus and the background is quite blurred. It saves it as the two files. One is the original and the second is the improved depth of vision mode. And on the camera it has some of the standard things. So flash on auto, I just usually have it off. This is I think the white balance is what it's referring to, and it's actually quite spot on. So the picture on the camera is similar to what's actually being shown behind it there. The auto is actually quite nice and works really well. The video, you have some options. Right on the screen you have 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. I do usually stay in the 30 frames per second. And same thing with the white balance and the flash being on or off. Not a bad shot because tree. There we go. Now we're going to leave because the mosquitoes are getting quite active. The camera has a lot of options. The night sight is actually pretty good. I'll show you an example of some of the night sight pictures. Time lapse, I'll show you some video of some different time lapse that I've taken. It is kind of neat because you can change. So for example, I go to 120 times. So in 20 minutes time, it'll take about 10 seconds of footage. Slow motion, again, I'll show you some examples of slow motion. Slow motion is in 720p. That you can't change. But you can change the speed. So 1/8 times or a little bit faster at 1/4 times. So settings, save location, camera sounds. I take that off. Gestures. So the volume buttons can be used for, again, taking a picture. If you hold the volume button down, it will take burst photos, so it'll take a bunch of photos quite quickly. And again, if you double tap, it can do different things. So you can zoom in for a double tap, or you can switch the camera, etc. So advanced is just, I have the HDR control off, so when this setting's off, the HDR stays on all the time, which is kind of how I like it. If you wanted more control, I do RAW, but I just do I don't do any post processing. I don't have the time to do that. And the resolution, so right now I have it on both on the highest resolution, so 4:3 aspect ratio. Front camera is not that bad, 8 megapixels. The back camera is the 12.2. And you can crop it to change it to a 16:9, say you're doing it in a video format, so you can change that, or you can actually just change it to a 16:9, 8.3 megapixels. So it's a fair bit of a drop in terms of megapixels, but I haven't noticed a big difference unless you're really zooming into the subject. And the back camera, so the camera, you can go up to 4K 30 FPS, HD, so 1080p and 720p, and you can't go lower than that. The front camera, 1080p.
I I'm really impressed with the quality of the photographs and of the video. As an everyday person, I couldn't tell you squat about the different camera terminology and technical specs. All I know is that I love the different depth of views and the colors, and other people have noticed it as well. I keep getting comments like, wow, that camera is really good. One of my archery videos was filmed entirely with this Pixel 3a using the front and rear facing cameras. I can't believe what I've been missing out when I was using my previous budget smartphone. I guess you get what you pay for. Now when you're in the picture mode, you can easily choose from some preset color changes, or what I prefer to do is manually adjust the light color and contrast, or in this case, I believe they call it pop. Now, some downsides to this phone are the lack of water resistance, the storage capacity, and, well, that's it. Oh, and well, the other downside is the price in Canadian dollars is around $550. After tax, it hits over $600. So my plan is to keep this phone for at least 5 years to make it worth it. Now I know for some people that's a really long time. And if the way technology is changing, it sounds ludicrous, but to regular people like me, and especially cheap people like me, 5 years is nothing. I'm happy with my purchase, and would I buy it again? Of course. With pretty good processor, excellent camera, this is something I've fallen in love with. I'm guessing though, in this price range, you can't go wrong with something like an older Samsung S8, but to each his own. Thanks for watching, and stay cheapish with Ladybug Adventures.